All right, apologies. Good afternoon. I will start off by reading off the statement that we issued earlier today on the summit between the leaders of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the U.S. The Secretary General welcomes the holding of the summit between the leaders of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the United States as an important milestone in the advancement of sustainable peace and the complete and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. As the Secretary General noted in letters to both leaders before the summit, the road ahead requires cooperations, compromise, and a common cause. Implementing today's and previous agreements reached in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions will require patience and support from the global community. The Secretary General urges all concerned parties to seize this momentous opportunity, and he reiterates his readiness to fully support the ongoing progress. And also earlier today, there was a statement from the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Mr. Amano, who also pledged IAEA support if called upon. Travel to announce. This Sunday, the Secretary General will leave for a trip to Finland, Norway, and the Russian Federation. In Helsinki, the Secretary General will be attending the second meeting of his high-level advisory board on mediation. He will also attend the Kulturanta talks, which is an annual debate on foreign and security policy organized by the Finnish president. The theme of the talks this year is the future of the international system. He will then go on to Norway, where he will speak at the Oslo Forum, which is a retreat for international conflict mediators and high-level decision-makers. That meeting is co-hosted by the Norwegian Foreign Ministry and the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. While in the Norwegian capital, the Secretary General will also meet with King Harald V and His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Haakon, who is also a UNDP Goodwill Ambassador focusing on ending poverty. The Secretary General will also be hosted and meet with the Prime Minister, Erna Solberg, and the Foreign Minister of Norway. And finally, he will go on to Moscow, where he is scheduled to meet with President Vladimir Putin and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The Secretary General will also have an audience with His Holiness Kirill, the Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, and that he is the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. The Secretary General will deliver remarks at the Moscow-based think tank, the Valdai Discussion Club, and he will also be participating in a ceremony commemorating the 70th anniversary of the UN's presence in Russia. And, as he's already said, he will also be attending the Portugal-Morocco game, which is part of the first round games of the World Cup, which, as you know, is being held in Russia this year. And we expect the Secretary General to be back in New York on the 22nd of June. Earlier this morning, he addressed the 11th session of the Conference of State Parties to the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In his remarks, the Secretary General stressed that the convention, with 177 ratification since it was adopted in 2006, is a historical commitment which reaffirms that people with disabilities are entitled to exactly the same rights as everyone else, and that societies must be organized so that all people, including those with disabilities, can exercise those rights fully. But by signing and ratifying the convention is not enough. Implementation is essential, he said, not as an act of charity, but as a recognition of the rights and a practical necessity if we are to build healthy, sustainable societies for the benefit of everyone. The Secretary General also recalled he had initiated a comprehensive review of the UN's work in this area in order to make sure that the organization is leading by example. Those remarks have been shared with you. And a bit later, he spoke at the General Assembly at a meeting reviewing the progress against HIV/AIDS, that on all continents, key populations at higher risk of infections continue to be left further and further behind. The Secretary General stressed the need to empower young people to protect themselves from HIV. This concludes providing a full range of sexual and reproductive health services and rights, harm reduction for people who use drugs, access to antiretroviral treatment for people living with HIV. Prevention is the key to breaking the cycle of HIV transmission, he said. At this pivotal moment, we must renew our focus and shared commitment to the world free of AIDS. The pandemic is not over, but it can be, and we must all do our parts, he said. And an update from Bangladesh, where the first heavy rains of the year have swept through Rohingya refugee settlements in Cox's Bazar. This happened over the weekend, marking the start of the monsoon season. Our colleagues at UNHCR tell us that this is an early test for refugee and humanitarian agencies working to support the government of Bangladesh on the response efforts. Torrential rain and winds up to 70 kilometers per hour caused at least 89 reported incidents, including 37 landslide incidents causing several injuries and one confirmed fatality, that of a child. Nearly 2,500 refugee families, some 11,000 people in all, were impacted by these rains. According to a damage assessment, more than 1,000 shelters were damaged, as well as 10 water points, 167 latrines, a health facility, and one food distribution center. The rains have also flooded the main road through the Kutupalong settlement, temporarily blocking vehicle access to other parts of the site. While relocation and aid distribution continue, UNHCR is pre-positioning more emergency supplies, including 10,000 tents, 190,000 tarpaulins, as well as 2 million water purification tablets ready for use when needed. UNHCR also has 5 hospital tents and emergency health kits stored in permanent warehouses in Cox's Bazar. Excuse me. Turning to Iraq, the Secretary General Special Representative for Iraq, Jan Kubish, issued a statement late yesterday calling upon Iraq's election management bodies to expeditiously investigate and adjudicate all complaints of electoral fraud and violations in a fully transparent way that promotes the integrity of the electoral process and the legitimacy of all its results in line with the Constitution of Iraq. He called upon all political bodies and their supporters to uphold the peace and to remain committed to resolving any electoral disputes through legal channels. And he also urged the Iraqi government, the security forces, and the electoral management bodies to take all appropriate steps to secure electoral materials, in particular in light of the recent fire incidents affecting some of the Electoral Commission's warehouses. And concerning Syria, the Special Envoy, Stéphane de Mistura, has held consultations in Cairo and today and had substantive and useful discussions with President al-Sisi of Egypt. The Special Envoy underscored the importance of contribution that Egypt can make in support of the UN-facilitated process in Syria. The Special Envoy will return to Geneva tomorrow. Meanwhile, our humanitarian colleagues say they're deeply concerned for the safety and protection of civilians in southern Hasake Governorate following recent intensification of hostilities. Since the beginning of the month, 44 civilians have reportedly been killed in the governorate as a result of the fighting and military operations against Daesh. The UN calls on all parties to spare civilians and take all necessary measures to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, to allow for safe, sustained, and unimpeded humanitarian access to all in need, particularly those in hard-to-reach areas and besieged areas, and required by international humanitarian law and human rights law. And the UN Refugee Agency today underscored the importance of working closely with Lebanon to find safe, dignified, and sustainable solutions for Syrian refugees. In all countries, the agency says it respects the right of refugees to decide freely and for themselves on returning homes. And similarly, it does not discourage returns that are based on individual, free, and informed decisions. UNHCR is very concerned at Friday's announcement by the Foreign Minister of Lebanon to freeze the issuance of residence permits to international staff of UNHCR in Lebanon. This directly impacts UNHCR's ability to effectively carry out its critical protection and solutions work in Lebanon. UNHCR hopes the decision of the Foreign Ministry will be reversed without delay. And our colleagues at the UN Migration Agency today welcome the decision by Spain to offer safe harbor to over 600 migrants, including scores of children and 7 pregnant women who have been waiting aboard a rescue vessel since Sunday. The Director General of IOM, Bill Swing, said he was glad that Spain had stepped forward to defuse the crisis, but he said he feared a major tragedy if states start refusing to accept rescued migrants that are threatened. He added that keeping the rescued people at sea is not going to dissuade other migrants from crossing Europe, and they too will need to be rescued sooner or later. And IOM also warned today that Ukraine is the largest displacement crisis in Europe since the Balkan Wars. Speaking after her visit to Kiev and to conflict areas in eastern Ukraine, The IOM's regional director said that with thousands dead and 1.5 million displaced, this is scandalous that this conflict remains largely forgotten. And today is the World Day Against Child Labor. This year's theme is Generation Safe and Healthy, and it focuses on improving the safety of health of young workers on ending child labor. About 73 million children are in hazardous work. These children are toiling in mines, fields, factories, and homes, exposed to pesticides and other toxic substances. They carry heavy loads and work long hours. The Food and Agricultural Organization also today warned that after years of steady decline, child labor in agriculture has started to rise again in recent years, driven in part by an increase in conflict and climate-induced disasters. The agency says this not only threatens the well-being of millions of children, but also undermines efforts to end global hunger and poverty. And I've been asked a number of times by a number of you off-site about the process for selecting the next High Commissioner for Human Rights. And I can confirm that the UN, the Secretariat, has sent out letters to permanent missions to request nominations for this position. The letter was also shared with major human rights NGOs, and this will be in addition to the Secretary General's own search. As you're aware, the High Commissioner for Human Rights is appointed by the Secretary General and approved by the General Assembly for a 4-year term. In order to ensure a wide pool of candidates for this position, the Secretariat would welcome any nominations to supplement the Secretary General's own search, and the nomination of women candidates is strongly encouraged. I will take questions. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. 2 questions. First, does the Secretary General have any plans to follow up on his offers of assistance of the United Nations and its agencies to the leaders?
Sure. I mean, sorry. Okay, I can. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. No, we do expect to be in contact with U.S. authorities in the coming days. Obviously, I think the summit ended just a few hours ago. People are flying to various destinations, but we do expect contacts to be had in the coming days.
And my second question was, there are reports that an attack on Hodeidah might be imminent. Mm-hmm. Is there any update from Mr. Griffiths on what's happening there?
I don't have. Mr. Griffiths is now back in Amman. He remains in contacts with the parties, but I have no direct information as to the actual situation on the ground as of now. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Stéphane. We have been seeing some reports of airstrikes and clashes in Idlib. I was wondering if the UN has any presence and if you have an update on the humanitarian situation. And also my second question is on Myanmar. The special envoy for Myanmar would be traveling today, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, she's there. I think, if I'm not mistaken, she's there.
And do you have
today.
An update on the visit?
This is her first day. I think the first day was probably being spent in Yangon or Naypyidaw. We're trying to get some details as to what field visits she may be able to do. Carol, sorry. Oh, sorry, and Idlib, no update on Syria besides what I've already mentioned. Carol.
Stéphane, on North Korea, is the Secretary General concerned or disappointed that the joint statement makes no mention of verifiable denuclearization, which is a point he made in his statement at the stakeout ahead of the summit?
No, I think, for the Secretary General, as I said, he very much welcomed the holding of the summit, which he feels is an important milestone. What the Secretary General would like to ultimately see has not changed, which is a peaceful and complete verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. So his position has not changed, and I think obviously it's early days, but I think he was he very much welcomed and was pleased that the summit took place. Yep.
Yes, and Stéphane, but how important is verification in order to reach that goal that the Secretary General have, that ultimate goal?
I think if the Secretary General would be here, he would say nerves of steel. This is the beginning of a process. The United Nations will be there to help along the parties. It is in as much as they wish, and obviously we need to see get a bit more details. Yep.
Just this morning on with George Stephanopoulos, President Trump said of Kim Jong-un, his country does love him. His people, you can see the fervor. They have great fervor. Does the United Nations have any concern about the signal that rhetoric like this signals for human rights in North Korea? And is this sort of language just a kind of necessary part of
listen, I'm not going to play the role of commentator for what is being said in interviews. I think the United Nations stance on the situation of human rights in the DPRK has been cleared and is unchanged.
But in terms of forgetting about rhetoric in interviews, what about in policy? That in the statement there was no mention of that.
I will leave the analysis to the analysts. Yep.
Thank you, Stéphane. You mentioned that the UN is there to help and support the talks. In what ways can the UN do that? What concrete steps can the UN
obviously,
help
whether
provide?
it's the IEA, the CTBTO, we have different technical parts of the UN, which can play a role towards the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Olga.
Thanks, Stéphane. Just to clarify about the long visit of Secretary General, so he leaves for Finland on Sunday. Mm-hmm. So what day will he be where?
He will be Monday in Finland, Tuesday in Norway, and then Wednesday. And he arrives in Moscow, if I'm not mistaken, Wednesday afternoon, and then he leaves. He's there about 2 nights. One of my colleagues will bring me a note with more details as I stop trying to improvise. Yes, you've been very patient.
Hi. Also about the Trump-Kim summit, President Trump said after the meeting that he hopes China would participate in the signing process of a peace treaty. He said China has been very helpful. So I would like to know that if the Secretary General has any comment about China's role that bring the two leaders together closer for talks.
Look, we're not privy to whatever discussions may have taken place before, but it's clear that China has a very important part to play in the situation in the Korean Peninsula and has played a very positive role. Mr. Abadi and then Nabil.
Thank you, Stéphane. Regarding the statement you read out on the summit, the Secretary General's statement, I have 2 questions. One, he refers to 2 letters sent to the 2 leaders. Mm-hmm. Have these letters been made public, and why not, if not?
No, they were sent around May 11th. They were private letters. They were not made public. Sometimes in diplomacy we do things above the waterline, sometimes under the waterline, but I think the gist of the letter is clear in the statement, which the Secretary General said the road ahead requires cooperations, compromise, and a common cause. The Secretary General has been very supportive of these diplomatic initiatives, whether it was the first summit between the leaders of the DPRK and the Republic of Korea, or now the meeting between the U.S. President and the leader of the DPRK. The letter were words of encouragement, just as he himself said publicly yesterday.
And my second question about the same statement, he refers to denuclearization and he used the word complete and verifiable, but he left out the third adjective, which is commonly used with respect to the process, which is irreversible. Why?
I think no one would want to see a denuclearization which is then reversed. Nabil.
Yes, on Lebanon, you read the statement on the Lebanese Foreign Minister position. So has the SGE replied to the Lebanese foreign minister letter? I think he sent a letter on this matter to the SGE. And if not, what's the SGE's message to the Lebanese government on that? And I have another question.
I don't know if the letter has been replied to. I think the Secretary General has been very clear on the issue of refugee rights, that any return needs to be voluntary. He backs UNHCR, and I think the Secretary General, like we all do, recognizes the immense generosity of the people and government of Lebanon in having hosted so many refugees for so long. And I think we can never honor enough that generosity. But there's certain issues in terms of refugee rights and principles that the Secretary General feels very strongly about.
And on Hodeidah port and city, there are reports say that the UN moved or evacuated the international presence or personnel from Hodeidah. Can you confirm that? Do you have any numbers and
Sure.
plans for the
the
future?
UN temporarily reconfigured its presence in Hodeidah. Humanitarian footprints, as I've said here quite often, the footprint shifts based on operational requirements and other considerations, including obviously security. Dozens of UN staff currently remain in Hodeidah. Critical operations continue, and obviously we have made a decision to stay and deliver.
So, do you have any number? And
who
are the people
the
that you
reconfiguration that I've just talked about includes temporarily reducing overall staff numbers and temporarily relocating international staff. This also sometimes happens during the Eid period. Currently, there are about 41 national UN staff remaining in Hodeidah. And again, I think this underscores the fact that most of the vast majority of the humanitarian work done in these crisis countries, whether it's in Yemen or in Syria, is in fact done by nationals. Carol.
Defective microphone. I have two follow-up questions. You said on North Korea that you expected a meeting with the U.S.
No, I didn't say I expected a meeting. I expected contacts to be had.
Okay, so there's nothing set up.
No,
There's no.
no. I mean, it could be contacts at various levels. But I didn't say meeting.
Okay. I want to clarify that. And can you tell us a bit what the Secretary General might be discussing with President Putin when they meet?
I think there's a host of issues as a permanent member of the Security Council. I think there are quite a lot of issues on the agenda. We can expect them to discuss Syria, to discuss UN reform, and just there's a full complement of peace and security issues that should be discussed, and that may very well be discussed. Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Stéphane. In the joint declaration issued in Singapore, the declaration refers to the promotion of peace and security not only in the peninsula but also in the whole world. How important a role is the UN going to play in the process?
As the Secretary General said, we stand ready to assist the parties in implementing and moving the process forward. Yep. The ink is barely dry on what was signed. Obviously, we will have contacts to get more details. Yes, sir.
Regarding the assistance of the UN to the summit or the process that will come afterwards, was the UN formally requested to assist in, and if yes, in what?
No, as I said, the reaction from the Secretary General. I mean, you heard him yesterday. You heard the head of the IEA today, and again the Secretary General's statement. We stand ready to assist, and obviously contacts will be had to see how and when we could assist.
Different question.
You may.
In what capacity will Mr. Guterres be attending the Morocco-Portugal game? And what country will
he will be
supporting?
attending as a guest of the host, the Russian president. As to where his heart will beat, I will let you guess. Or for whom his heart will beat.
Well, I'm guessing because he is the UN General.
What the Secretary General is interested in is fair play and ensure that everybody has a good time. just like we do here at the briefing. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, sorry.
I'm just not clear where things stand. You said that Martin Griffiths has gone back to Amman, so presumably the period of intense negotiations is over. And what was the outcome?
Listen, Mr. Griffiths is able to use the phone and email and other ways to communicate with the parties. We remain in touch. As you know, the Yemeni foreign minister was here talking to the Secretary General yesterday. We are trying to do whatever we can to avoid a bloody battle for Hodeidah, which would have devastating humanitarian consequences. We would like to see all the parties redouble their efforts and recommit and to a political solution for Yemen and to stop the suffering of the Yemeni people, which has gone for much too long and continues every day. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Stay here. On the trip, the Secretary General will be in Finland on the 18th, Norway on the 19th, and basically in Russia on the 20th and the 21st. And I will vacate. Well, yeah, I know you don't want to push me out, but that's right.
Good afternoon. This morning, the General Assembly is holding its annual plenary debate on HIV/AIDS. In his remarks, the President said, HIV is still a huge challenge. Yes, there have been success stories, but we cannot afford to slow down. He noted it is not the case that everyone has the same chance of contracting HIV. It is not the case that everyone has the same chance of surviving it, and this is not the way things should be. We cannot continue to leave people behind. He concluded by saying, let's keep fighting this virus and the stigma that comes with it. Let's speak up louder in memory of those who have died and in support of those who are living with HIV and AIDS today. The full remarks are on our website. The President just met with Louise Arbour, the Secretary General's Special Representative for International Migration. He also met yesterday with the ambassadors of Mexico and Switzerland, who serve as the co-facilitators for the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. The aim of both meetings was to discuss the process as it moves into its final stage. The final round of migration negotiations is scheduled to take place during the week of 9 July. A revised draft of the Global Compact is expected to be circulated the week before that. The General Assembly plenary will meet this afternoon under the agenda item Protracted Conflicts in the Guam Area and Their Implications for International Peace, Security, and Development. Guam is a grouping that brings together Georgia, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, and Moldova. The plenary will consider a draft resolution entitled Status of Internally Displaced Persons and Refugees from Abkhazia, Georgia, and the Tskhinvali region, South Ossetia, Georgia. The President is meeting around now with the Secretary General of the Arab League. The expected topic of discussion is the work of the Arab League, including with respect to the Middle East. And speaking of the Middle East, tomorrow, the 10th Emergency Special Session of the General Assembly will be resumed at 3 p.m. The President is convening the meeting following a formal request from the permanent representatives of Algeria and Turkey in their respective capacities as chair of the Arab Group and chair of the Summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. And that's it from me. Any questions? Yes, Edie.
Brendan, thank you. Is any outcome expected from the meeting on HIV/AIDS today?
I believe there. Let me check, and I'll get back to you on that. Yeah, Olga.
Brendan, thank you. About tomorrow's meeting on General Assembly on Palestine, how do you expect it to be held? What's the schedule? I mean, do you expect the vote first or maybe the statements of member states?
So it'll start at 3 p.m. and begin with statements from member states. And then at the very end of the meeting, we'll see action on the draft resolution.
So, and what's the agenda of the meeting, the United for Peace, or...?
It's basically a resumption of the 10th Emergency Special Session. The last time it was resumed was in December. This is a continuation of that. Yes, Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Brendan. Is the draft resolution similar to the one that was not voted in the Security Council, or has it been modified?
The draft resolution has been submitted to the Secretariat, but has not yet been published as an official L document, so I can't go too much into the details on it. But hopefully it'll be out soon. Yes, go ahead.
After the historical summit of the leaders of U.S. and the DPRK in Singapore, do you think what UN can do to support the process of the peace and the denuclearization of Korean Peninsula? Thank you.
Well, the President considers today's summit to be a positive first step in the right direction. He hopes to see further steps towards lasting peace and stability and verifiable denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much.